Hi everyone, welcome back to Sympathy for the Sequel. I'm Alex West, co-host of the Faculty of Horror podcast, author and contributor to RUE MORGUE. What we do in this series is we take a major horror franchise and we have a look-see on Rotten Tomatoes to find out what is the lowest rated entry in that franchise. We give it a rewatch, we do some research, and we try to figure out why it was so perhaps unjustly maligned, and we have to find at least a few redeeming qualities within it. So, for today's episode, we're doing the Grudge. We're doing the Grudge. So The Grudge is a franchise about what happens when someone dies in a terrible rage and their vengeful ghost comes after you and anyone who gets near them and just perpetuates malevolent hauntings for as long as the film can last. The American remake came out in 2004 and it was preceded by two original Japanese films, Ju-on the Grudge and Ju-on the Grudge 2. So the original Japanese movies, the original American remake, and the sequel were directed by Takashi Shimizu, and unfortunately The Grudge 2 is the lowest rated entry with 12%.
I booked a flight. It leaves early tomorrow morning.
What's going on?
There's been an accident.
No.
Your sister's in the hospital.
What kind of an accident?
Mark Savlov of the Austin Chronicle writes, Japanese director Shimizu may be the only director in history to have helmed a pair of Hollywood remakes of his two biggest hit films and managed to screw up both of them. Nick Rogers of The Film Yap writes, Takashi Shimizu telegraphs scares to the point of numbness. Peek under a table, there's a boy. A room that's a bit too quiet. Is it? It's a girl. All that's frightening are the actors' pained facial expressions suggesting an epidemic of farty indigestion. So to talk about The Grudge 2, we need to go back to 2004 when the first American remake of The Grudge was released. This was, of course, aping on the huge success of Gore Verbinski's The Ring, which was released in 2002. It surprised people, it terrified people. We had a new horror icon for the new millennium with Samara, and it really took off. So a few years later, audiences were primed for another scary ghost lady. The Grudge in 2004 did so well, it recouped its budget in the first weekend. So the Monday after opening weekend, all the producers were like, we need a sequel. Let's get this sequel going. Gimme, gimme, gimme. 2 years later, after some development stop and starts and some production stops and starts, it came out. The Grudge 2 sees a few familiar faces returning to this follow-up. Of course, Takashi Shimizu, the director, is returning, and star of the first film, Sarah Michelle Gellar, reprises her role as Karen. The goal for this film was to essentially replicate the same structure of the earlier films, which sees seemingly disparate stories of different people being haunted by the same ghostly force. And as the film goes on, it is revealed how they are connected to each other. Now, they repeat that in The Grudge 2, but this time Shimizu said he wanted to add in more folkloric elements, more history to the main antagonist ghost, Kayako. Now, I'm going to say this off the top, The Grudge 2 isn't bad. It's actually pretty good in some, particular sequences, and it's really, really watchable, I found anyway. I think it was probably a little too close to the original film in terms of like the three stories and how do they connect. And yes, there is a little bit more of Japanese folklore in this film, but it doesn't make a huge amount of difference to the end product. Like the first one, all of these stories show how various characters are tormented by Kayako, the angry ghost woman, her son, also a ghost, and her cat, also a ghost. The film is basically replicating different ways that this trinity of ghosts can pop up to create new scares and scenarios that will get us all jumping out of our seats. The first story follows Karen from the first film as she grapples with what has happened to her after she tried to destroy Kayako and her house. Her younger sister Aubrey comes to Japan to retrieve her and bring her home to the States. But Aubrey gets in contact with Kayako's ghost, and of course the whole cycle repeats itself once again. Another story has 3 schoolgirls going to Kayako's burned out home for some kicks and some pranks. And that, of course, goes horribly wrong because anyone who goes in that house is cursed. And the third story consists of an American family and is the only one to take place fully in America. The whole time you're like, why are these people all getting haunted? They're all getting haunted by the same people, and why and how and who and what. And it's kind of the central mystery for the film. So there isn't a lot of like meat to this film, but there is a lot of anxiety about who gets to go where, who has access to what kind of spaces, and how people are actually connected or not connecting through these films. Like a lot of great Asian horror films, there is a sense of a viral pandemic through ghosts, and The Grudge is that as well. It's all about interpersonal connections, or sometimes the lack thereof, the way people communicate or fail to communicate with each other. So in that way, I think this can be a really effective way to tell the ghost story of Kayako, but it does veer a little too similar to The Grudge, the original films, and so it can sometimes feel repetitive. And if we're watching a Grudge movie, we're in it for the scares, for the jumps, for the creepiness. We want that. So in that way, The Grudge delivers. While it's a very effective film, it's also a very strange film. And a lot of the strangeness kind of is what is memorable about it and why I love it so much. This film really tries to sell Kayako as the new millennium's face of horror. The most fascinating version of this is right at the very, very beginning of the film in the production logos. You're watching it and you're like, ooh, I'm in for a creepy movie. And then the Columbia logo comes up and it just like all of a sudden like, go, it goes crazy. And the Columbia lady turns into Kayako. It's so stupid. It looks so bad, but it is so funny. Another good thing, Ryo Ishibashi, he pops up again as another little cameo carryover from the first film. He plays the detective and he is a fantastic actor. This is a bit of an odd good thing because you watch in this film and you're like, oh my God, I love Ryo Ishibashi. And then you're like, wait, no, he's in the first one more. Maybe I should watch the first one again. And then you're like, well, I really love Ryo Ishibashi because he was one of the 2 leads in Audition, the Takashi Miike film. And should I just rewatch Takashi Miike's Audition? I probably should. And then you finish The Grudge 2 and you just watch Audition again. So I think that's a really good thing because Audition is
Ishibashi.
Amazing. There were also a few things in this film. I couldn't find anywhere to mention them in this segment, so I'm just going to mention them now. 1, a bully pisses themselves. 2, a ghost tickles someone.
Stop, Micah!
3, the amount that Karen and Aubrey's mother hates Aubrey is incredible. It's like this woman loathes her younger daughter. I don't even think my worst enemies hate me as much as Aubrey's mom hated her. What a great spice to add to this film, just pure maternal hatred. You don't see enough of that, really, frankly, these days. And finally, as I alluded to, this film has a lot of really good scares. It is very effective. It is very creepy. I absolutely jumped a few times. I think, well, in some ways, it's a very simple film. It's an incredibly effective film, and it does what it says on the tin. It's gonna freak you out. It's gonna show you more scary ghost stuff, and what more could you want? So that is our episode on the Grudge franchise. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Alex West, and if you haven't already, please like and subscribe, and leave us a comment below. Let us know what you think of the Grudge franchise as a whole, as individual films, about the whole J-horror movement and the A-horror movement, and also let us know what you think we should do next in terms of franchises. And until we are one nation under Kayako, we'll see you in the sequel. I have 2 theater degrees.
Very good.
Thank you.